Live.
Oh, that's cool. You can do
Hey,
straight from Zoom?
you can do straight from Zoom. It's
That's
it's a
cool.
new age we live in.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone. Happy Friday. If you are tuning in live, if you are watching the replay, then happy whatever day you're tuning in. Thank you for joining me in the huddle. JT here. So yeah, people, it's been interesting, and I'll just share this with you before we start. Been getting a lot of feedback on the huddle. And one of the really cool things about it is it's really allowed our community to grow, to this thinking into greatness family to grow. And it's really been amazing to hear the feedback, to hear the insights that many of you are getting listening to this. And what I want you to do is really go all in today. Today, I have a special guest, someone who I've known for many years. We reconnected in the last year. And I promise you, if you listen to his story and if you follow his journey to greatness, you will leave this conversation with greater insight on what it takes, right? Like it takes what it takes. That's the title we came up with for today. So please, everyone thinking into greatness community, please help me welcome my special guest today, Ben Koczwara. Thanks for coming to the huddle today, Ben.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, definitely love having you on. So for those that don't know, Ben and I first met in 2013, and we were part of the same travel football team in London, Ontario. It was called the London Junior Mustangs. And just to give you some insight, these were kind of think of it like an all-star team. This was a group of the best football players in the London area, which Ben was and still is. And we came together. We travel around the province playing other, big city centers. And that's where I first met Ben. And then Ben went on to play at Waterloo, the University of Waterloo, where he was an integral member there and an OUA All-Star. And then Ben has gone on to playing professional football. So again, you'll definitely learn a lot from his story, right? Success always leaves clues. So any of you that are really looking to take things to your next level of greatness, whether it's in sport, whether it's in business, whether it's in health, the lessons you'll learn from Ben today, right, will help you do that. So, Ben, what I would love to do is to introduce you to the community and just sort of learn more a little bit about you. So, what I would love to know is what was that? Was there an experience? Was there a time where you first started to fall in love with sport?
I don't know if there's like a specific time I fell in love with sport. It's kind of one of those things. I grew up, my dad loved sports. He played a lot of basketball. He played volleyball in high school and university and stuff. And then watching football, watching basketball on TV, March right now, March Madness was always on the TV, no matter what as a kid. So I just kind of grew up around sport. I played baseball as a kid, did a little bit of basketball as a kid, and just kind of one of those things that it was like always part of my life. So then, as you grow up and you kind of develop your own interests, it's okay. Obviously, I started to play a lot of football. I still played basketball for quite a few years. Up until the end of high school. So it's just kind of like always part of my life. And then, you kind of find the one, like I love football. Football is like obviously my favorite sport, but even you find things kind of other sports that kind of help you with the sport that you're focused on. When I got to university, obviously football was the main, and I played a little bit of intramural basketball just for some fun with the guys. But I got into playing some squash, which is a lot of like the lateral change of direction, quick movements and stuff like that, which was a ton of fun. I lost like every game because I play with guys that are like running backs and receivers and stuff, so they're much quicker than I am. So it didn't go that great, but it's like you just kind of find all kinds of sports and you just love competing and love trying to get better.
And it's so interesting, like hearing this from you, because I know that your dad, I did know that he had played in university as well, was an athlete in university, but I do remember that your dad was really involved. Like I remember him, he was a coach at SDA, right? In high school.
Yeah, well, he coached the girls basketball team when I was very, very young, when I was like, infant. And then as I got older, he then switched over to coach the high school junior football team. And then he goes and he'll go help out the men's basketball team and stuff like that at the school as well. So he's part of that is just he likes to be involved in the school. That's his stick. He's always doing stuff and having a good time at school. He has too much fun. But yeah, no, he was always involved in sports and coaching and stuff. I used to get messages in the university. You got any good drills for working this for offensive line? Give me a second. I gotta finish this math class, and then I'll get you something.
Well, and I love that, right? And it's been interesting, working with athletes for the last 20 years. It's really amazing to see that many of the athletes that really maximize their potential, that really get to that next level, whether it's university, whether that's professional, it's interesting how much of support they had with their family, right? With the parents. And it's amazing to hear that, dad was so supportive of it. One thing that you mentioned, which I didn't know, but I love, is that you identified that you played different sports growing up, like you played baseball. And I think about it, I mean, you got, long levers. Again, I could see totally being great at baseball, but then you start to develop that, you start to realize that football was what you were passionate about, but you still continued to play basketball. You chose to pick up squash and do that. Like, what was that something that was born into you, or was that just something you naturally gravitated to like finding different ways to improve your game?
Basketball was something I grew up playing basketball. Like I said, my dad played basketball. He coached basketball. We loved basketball, so we always had like a hoop in the driveway kind of thing. And I played club basketball, like traveling around Ontario up until like from about grade 7, I want to say, until about grade 10. And then grade 10, I dialed in and spent that time on weightlifting and things like that, and just played high school basketball. So basketball just happened to work out well. That it was a good transition to football, because I do love basketball, love playing basketball. The squash thing was more of I had a coach, actually, Coach Robichaux. I think he was on that. He told me to play squash, and I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. So I had a ton of fun with that, and it was very good for, like I said, be able to change direction, be light on your feet, being able to move. And then, so like I said, I had a running back, slot back receiver who was a very good buddies with. So he and I would get a couple guys together. We'd go play a couple rounds. We'd go get a couple squash courts and play for an hour or 2 hours, just rotating games around in the morning. So that's, I don't know, that part was kind of like, I was looking for ways you always want to look for different ways to kind of develop those skill sets. It's, you can do a ladder all day and do pylon drills, and you'll get good at that, but it's a bit different when you're like competing and trying to win, right? So it's just kind of one of those things that I was interested in trying to use it to develop a skill that I felt is kind of hard to develop on its own. And then you just kind of start having fun and you want to win because you're competitive. So
Yeah. And it's interesting that you share that. And a word that kept coming up, even in early in our conversation, was that compete. And I'm a firm believer that people that achieve greatness in their health, that achieve greatness in their relationships, greatness in their businesses, in their career, in their school, they push themselves to compete, right? And again, it's not even competition versus other people. And obviously, yeah, like, I mean, you got to have that edge, right? To play at that next level, you got to have that edge. But even that, like, I love that you said earlier that, yeah, I got killed every most squash matches, but I was competing against athletes that were a little bit quicker, they're a little bit faster, but you just wanted to push yourself to be better.
Yeah, it's they always say, well, yeah, like if you play against, like if you practice against the guys that are like way better than you, then you're just gonna get better. And if you practice against guys that you can beat, you might get a little bit better because you can practice things that you need to work on because you know you're going to win regardless. But when you're playing against somebody that's got that edge on you, like they're probably going to beat me. So I got to make sure I'm on my P's and Q's to make sure that I can get this. And then you're doing it at a high speed as well, because, if you, as much as it's practice or you're just having competition with a buddy, these are like, everyone's going full out. These are more or less live bullets. So you don't have time to analyze and sit down and go slow. Like you still got to be moving at top speed and not, there's a time to train those slow movements when you're going through things, but a lot of times too, you can develop those things on the fly, just by repetition and live bullets situations.
Yeah, I love that. And it really sounds like, you have this ability to put yourself into uncomfortable situations and just like you said, just repetition, let the bullets fly, and you'll create the solution, right? Like you'll get better from it.
Yeah, it's like you can be the greatest practice player in the world, you know what I mean? When everyone's kind of, trying things or whatever, and when the bullets fly, that's when you got to be able to still be able to do those things. So I think that as much as you can practice and practice and practice and practice, but if you don't try to use that in like a real situation, then you're the greatest practice player in the world, but then you can't translate it over to a real game.
Yeah. One of the coaches I coached with during my last few years at Lucas, and someone who was a coach of ours at Western, used to talk about that difference between being, and we'll talk about, so for those that don't know, university football here is played on Saturdays typically, right?
Yeah.
And he used to have this saying, he's like, are you a Friday night all Canadian, or are you a Saturday all Canadian, right? And that's the difference, right? Is like, can you show up at your best when the live bullets are going on game day, or do you just kind of like putting on the jersey and practice and looking the part, right?
Yeah.
So what I would love to know, Ben, is you made the decision to go to Waterloo, right? And you were sort of at this point where, as we were chatting before, what was your decision to go there? I know Coach Burt, who was our head coach on that summer team in 2013, who again have always loved being around Coach Burt. Again, not only a great football mind, but just even a greater guy, right? Like I just love that you can kind of just shoot the shit with him, right? You can just, I think of all the conversation, right? Just sometimes having a beer. But what made you choose Waterloo and going there and choosing Coach Burt and going there? Yeah, love to know.
Well, actually, I chose Coach Burt. I was on the players council that hired him.
Okay.
He came in. My first year he wasn't the coach. My second year he was. I was on the players. Like there was like an alumni council, staff council, and there was like a bunch of players. So he came in and we were like asking him questions and stuff. So. I love Coach Burt though. Love him. I went to University of Waterloo because it was one of those things, like I wanted to keep playing football if I could. Yeah. I had a number of various schools like I was talking to and trying to figure out where I was going to go. But Waterloo was the math and computers is what I wanted to take in school. Okay. And I was like, they got a football team. This was a couple of years out of the steroid scandal and issues that they had. So I was like, you know what, maybe I can get in and, sit on the bench for a year or two and then get it in play. Because at the time coming out of high school, I played offensive line. But I was a little bit of a tweener body size in terms of going to the next level. I was only about 215, 220 as an offensive lineman. Doesn't really get it done in the university level. And, came into camp, was going to play like fullback, slot back, what kind of thing. And they're like, yeah, you're too slow. And we also only have 5 linemen down there. So just go down there and see what happens. And, a couple of things bounce this way or that way. And I end up play an offensive line, left tackle for the first year. And then, things just kind of roll out from there. And, things didn't go exactly as I planned school wise, because it's a very challenging school in terms of math and computers. But I wouldn't change that decision like for the world.
Yeah. Well, and it's great to hear that you made that decision. Like you knew I want to continue playing football, but you also realized that Waterloo was a great school, right? Like
Yeah, well, it's just everybody always asks me like, did you think you wanted to play university football when you were playing like in elementary school? It's like, not really. Just kind of I get to the end of every track and I'm like, well, I'm not done playing football yet, so let's see if we can keep this train going. So that was kind of the thing, is like I didn't know football was going to be, I didn't know if I was going to play ever, if I was going to do anything. So like school obviously had to be part of that decision. You couldn't just go on a whim to anywhere. I really didn't know what was going to happen. And, so Waterloo was my choice based on academics. And then I kind of basically, got lucky, bounced my way into the football team, never really looked back after that.
It's really interesting, like as you share that, right? That finding how you chose that, and I've had on a couple of your former teammates from that 2013 London Junior Mustangs team, and the two other guys both said the same thing. Like they made their decision, factoring in some school, and yeah, their passion for football, but really like what's the best fit for them. So it's great to hear that, you're the same way. So I didn't know that you were part of the hiring committee for Coach Burt, which I love.
Yeah, it was like there was like one player for like each year.
Yeah.
On this committee, and out of all the rookies that year, I think I had the most playing time and I was the most involved with the team. So they were like, "You want to be on this? Can you be on this committee and stuff?" So we sat in a room, and the various coaches that were applying for the job that had like been narrowed down, like the top 3 or 4, whatever, I don't remember, came in, and we all had a bunch of questions just to ask whoever the coach was. And actually, it was kind of funny. I remember. So Bert came in, and we kind of had these questions all lined up for him. And the first guy who asked the question, he asked it, and then Bert can talk. He can sell ice to anybody. You get iced tea in the middle of a blizzard, and he goes off and answers like all the other 6 questions we had. So we're just kind of sitting there like looking at each other like, okay, we got another 20 minutes to fill. How are we going to ask this guy the same question he just answered?
Yeah. That's a great story, right? So you go there. So Coach Burt comes to Waterloo, and one of the things I remember, right, as an outsider looking in, was you could start to see that London, Ontario flair started to come. Like you start to see more London guys come into Waterloo, right? Start following you there. What as the program, and I was mentioning this before, like you were really part of that rebuilding, right? Of really helping sort of put Waterloo back on the map. And I remember like the old days. My first year at Western, we actually played, I think it was Coach Burt's last year at Waterloo. And they, like, those weeks were tough weeks in practice, right? Because you knew when you were playing Waterloo, they're going to be fast, they're going to be physical, they're going to punch you in the mouth every play, right? That's just the way they played.
Yeah.
And that's what I noticed what during your time there is you guys started to sort of reestablish that sort of blue collar mentality, right? Like every snap of play, it's gonna be fast, it's gonna be physical, we're gonna punch you in the mouth. What was it like sort of being in that environment where you're sort of rebuilding things?
Well, like you said, Coach Burt came in, and he's all about how many different ways can we pull a guard and have him pull around and just smash somebody in the mouth. That's his entire playbook. So, like I said, it's just kind of like that mentality that we're going to come out and we're going to work and we're going to hit you in the mouth and see what happens, kind of thing. And I don't know, it was really cool. Just kind of like be a part of it. Especially like from an offensive line perspective, any offensive line that's, worth anything, that they're very close and just want to get after and pound you. punch you in the mouth and just play football. And I think, obviously Coach Matoya is an offensive line coach, a Western, helped out and stuff, and he goes everywhere with offensive line. So we really took on that mentality as an offensive line of just trying to hit guys in the mouth and just play hard. And I think it's one of those things that if you don't play football, you don't really understand that as the O-line goes, the team goes kind of thing, So when that happens, the guys on the defensive line realize in practice that, hey, I'm going to get hit in the mouth right here because this guy's coming at me. And the linebackers realize that. And, the running backs, they get excited when that happens. And we had a Dion Pellerin back there behind us for a few years. And he loves to do the same thing. He never gets tackled going backwards. He's always falling forwards. He gets fired up and then we get fired up. And it just kind of one of those things that environment just kind of grew as the years go by, and guys are in the system for a little bit, and that's kind of like, okay, this is the standard, you know what I mean? Like, we're trying to win games, obviously we're trying to get better and want to go take a run at the Yates and whatnot, but this is the standard. Like, if we're going to lose, they're going to know, like, whoever plays them next week is going to have to give us a call and say, hey, thanks for beating these guys up last week for us, because they're still feeling it. That was kind of the standard that was set in the locker room. So that's kind of, and once you do that, players will develop. We were a very young team at the time. When Bert came in, had a huge recruiting class, very young. I think the 1 year our average age was like 18 point something. Like, we weren't average age, couldn't even go in and buy a beer. So a very young team kind of develops forward after that with that mentality, and that I think that just makes it stick really well. You had those guys kind of work through that and kind of identify with that mentality.
I love that, Ben. And I love the word that you talked about was standards. And it sounds like what you guys did was you just kept raising the bar of what the standard was, right? Where, maybe that, and you made the choice every day as a leader, right? Even when it started back to your first year, that no, the standard is greatness, right? Like, every play, it's pin the ears back. We're going to get after someone and we're going to punch someone in the mouth. So what I would love to know is, someone who isn't played football might not understand that, but what has that sort of mentality taught you, right? And like, how is that applied to your life? Like, setting that sort of standard of greatness, right? Because anyone that knows you, anyone that's been around you knows, like, you're either all in or you're not in at all, right? Like, you're very similar to me. Like, what has that taught you to sort of, the standard's the standard?
The standard is the standard is one of those things. It's like, no matter where you go, it's like, okay, here's the expectation. Like, here's what's going to happen, right? And that's something that you have to meet. You have to hit. Like, no matter where, whether it's sports or like workplace, school, whatever. This is a standard, and this is what we have to maintain. I think the biggest thing though is the process of raising that standard. So like, anytime like you're learning something new, right? It's the same kind of concept. I feel like I'm working on some stuff in my free time of like, okay, I don't know anything about this. So here, this is the standard here. We don't know anything. The standard we have to get to is understand what's going on. Okay, then the next standard is, now this is the new standard. We have to be able to do this thing. And then here's the next standard. I think that transitions a lot more than maybe, the standard is a good mentality when you have a group and you get people together and you can run with that. This is the standard. But I think it's the raising of that standard bar is really kind of what translates best to like the real world and in any other fields.
Yeah. So it sounds like process is really important to you.
Yeah, it's like, if they always say you want to set like your big goal, then you want to have a bunch of little goals to hit on the way up to get to that one. I think that's just a much better way to go about attacking things, because then it's less intimidating, and you can focus on hitting this, right? If you want to squat 600 pounds and you're squatting 200 pounds, if you just be like, yeah, I want to squat 600 pounds, and you're just going to try and get there, that's a long road to climb, right? So if you hit those marks, okay, I'm squatting 200 pounds in a year, I want to be squatting 300 pounds. And then a year after that, I want to be squatting, like that kind of thing. I think that standard is that idea of those progressional goals is just a way better way to make yourself comfortable. You still have that overarching goal that, hey, I'm going to squat 600 pounds. You know that's there, but we got to make sure we hit these benchmarks before we get there, because there's no other way to do it.
Yeah, I love that. And what it really came up for me as you were sharing was this idea of process over product, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, anyone that's watching this, right? You know, people like you and I, like, yeah, we have big goals, but you have to sort of, like you said, hit those benchmarks to keep the fire burning, right? Because yeah, it might take a while to get from the 200-pound squat to the 600, but you'll get there. But you know, fall in love. You got to be able to squat 300 first, then 4, then 5, right? And then you get to 6, right? So
yeah,
I love that.
Being able to, like you said, keep that dedication and that drive alive, because you know there are going to be those days where you wake up and you're like, I don't want to go to the gym today. I don't want to do this. I absolutely want to go back to sleep right now. But those are the days when some would argue you have to get in and do those, because those are the days that will make the difference one way or the other. They'll kill you or they'll make the difference in your climb, right? So you just to keep that fire burning, to keep like, okay, 600, it's like, oh, I'm squatting 200 today. Today's not going to make a difference to me getting to 600, but today could make the difference for me getting from 200 to 300 for sure.
Yeah. I love that mentality, right? And that's why I said to you before the call, that's why I wore my camo, because I knew we were going into the trenches today. And I was like, okay, Ben's bring it today. I got to bring it. So I'm curious. We reconnected last spring, and it's it's an interesting time, right? Depending on when you're watching this. If you're watching this with us live or anytime soon, right? The world's had a bit of a pause, we'll say, an interesting one. How has that process mentality, how has that kept you motivated and inspired to do the work? Because, I mean, right now you're not able to play meaningful football games. Like, how have you really had to dial in that process mentality where, you're not really sure when that next opportunity to strap them on is coming from?
Yeah, I think it's the big thing is once again finding those little goals, right? So obviously the big goal is I want to play football. Like, that's what I want to get back. I want to put the pads on, run into people. But then you got to find those small goals within that process to being a football player that you can then pin. So if you want to hit a certain weight, squatting a certain weight in the gym, right? Okay, now you have that goal. Or if you have a certain goal of, some kind of ability to be able to do on the field. So, okay, I got to go to the gym. I got to go to the field to do all this work. So I really need to work on my pass set. Or I really need to work on my my explosion out of my second step as an offensive lineman. Those kinds of things, you got to find those small goals. Like I said, to kind of keep you churning is really what it is. And if you focus on that, the big picture kind of is going to fall into itself, right? You can't control things like COVID. Like, you can't make the decision that things are going to be fine and things are going to go. You can't do anything about that. So you got to focus on what you can control, and what you can control are those small goals and doing those small things to keep taking one step after the other and getting better. Coach Bird always says, you get better, you get worse. Nothing stays the same. So you got to be getting better every day, and you can do that by focusing on those small things and doing those small goals to get yourself moving forward.
I love that. And that speaks volumes, right, about your persistence, right? And some of those lessons that Coach Burt instilled in you. And again, you don't have to be into football to realize, but I really want to draw your attention to something Ben said. You want to see the difference between someone who's, sort of ordinary versus extraordinary, is listen to what Ben said, right? It was, I have to work on my step on the second step, right? And it's breaking things down to the finite and really, really making everything great, right? Because, you can't, everything's a process, right? To have a great final step, you have to have a great first step. And then from the first step, you have second. So I really want you to hone in, especially if you're an athlete or you're someone in business, like, listen to what Ben's saying. There's a reason he's at the top of his field. So I'm curious, Ben, what has been something that you've been working on? So it sounds like, you have this very growth mindset, right? Where you're constantly like finding new ways. What are you doing? Like, what new things are you taking on to really develop as, in other areas of your life right now? Like, is there something that you're really passionate about right now?
Obviously, like a lot of things stem from football.
Mhm.
So like for like example, when I contacted you last spring, it was at the beginning of a process of looking into a lot of the mental side of things, mental side of sports specifically at the time. That's why I was talking to you. So that kind of thing is very interesting. I still, try and read things and look up things. I have various podcasts that I like to listen to about people talking about different things like that. And being a skinny kid coming out of high school into university, and then trying to play offensive line, nutrition wasn't a huge concern. It was just shove as much food in your mouth as you can possibly get, so you can not be a skinny guy anymore. But now I'm at the point where it's like, you got to try and, now you have to actually like kind of do a better job of monitoring. Being a big guy, you can still get away with a little bit more because you just need the calories. But you got to focus on, okay, chicken breasts, rice, and carrots was a meal that I had all the time. My roommates would make fun of me. Oh, that's Ben's meal again. There he is. Or a huge bowl of pasta with some meat sauce. You got to start making those conscious decisions. That was something that I kind of learned a little bit in Mexico too, living with some guys down there that were very, they had their diet dialed in. So kind of learned that kind of thing. And then outside of football too, it's, just trying to find other things that interest you as well. I started to play quite a bit of golf, which is, if anybody's played golf, you know how frustrating that is because it's such a simple game, but it's such a detail-oriented game, and you got to be, doing everything perfectly. And if you slip up once, you just screw up an entire game. That's a big thing. As I mentioned, I went to school for like computers and math and stuff like that. So programming is something that I've always enjoyed doing. So I always do that on the side, which is another detail oriented thing. You miss a comma here, a semicolon there, and everything blows up in your face, and you got to figure out why.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I said, everything kind of relates to football in the sense that, detail oriented, these small things, these are things that affect your life. And then you can take those things and apply them to like mental side of football. You kind of understand how that works. And then you can apply that to your work life, or, hanging out with your friends or whatever. All that kind of stuff blends together, which is part of why I think football is probably the greatest sport ever, because there's so many things you learn in football that apply to the real world.
I love that, Ben. And what I really got from you there was that student mindset. And something my mentor talks about is that like be an intelligent follower. And I love that you are an effective leader, right? Like I feel like you will make, if you decided to, you would make an amazing football coach. You would make an amazing CEO because there is this like leadership equality because you would never ask anyone to do something you're not prepared to do. Like that's something that I've known you, like that's just there. But I love the fact that you're also though an intelligent follower, right? You're so hungry for, okay, so nutrition. How do I optimize? Right? When you reached out to me, how do I tap into, how do I integrate sort of like the mind body connection, right? How do I tweak the mental side of that? Or even just, the coding, right? Like finding out these ways about that detail there, right? And just, or golf, like she said, I've never really taken up golf because, yeah, I, whatever reason. But I love the fact of you're so hungry to just push yourself to do things better that it's like what makes you great.
I think part of it is like, they always say if you're the smartest guy in the room, you should go find another room, right? And always trying to learn stuff and see different, especially as I started looking into a lot of the mental stuff, see different people's perspectives on different things and stuff like that. And then like the golf thing is, I think once again is that attention to detail, and then that competition, like that drive to compete, because like it's everybody knows people to go play golf, right? So you got people to play against, and it's also different from football in the sense that like, so you play football, if I do something great and the guy across me does something great, like he could beat me and there's nothing I can do about it because he's just better than me. When you play golf, if you screw up, you screwed up. Like nobody, you can't blame anybody else. You're the guy who botched that shot. So that's the other thing too, is it's then again that competition within yourself. And if you watch the PGA Tour or any professional golfers, it's like they can all hit all the same shots, they can all do the same thing, but it's between the ears is when you see the difference between the Tiger Woods and the guy at the bottom of the PGA Tour. So then you have that mental part of the sport. Okay, next shot. Okay, don't worry about it. Yeah, that one, you're not finding that ball. It's in the forest at the bottom of the lake. Like you're not finding it. Just drop the ball and let's hit this one straight. And that kind of gives you that same kind of mentality.
I love it. And that's that 1%, right? And that's the theme for today. We're talking about, it takes what it takes. It's that, do you find that 1%? Yeah, like it just speaks volumes about how coachable you are, right? And folks, here's what I'll let you know. Ben has reached out to me a number of times, like, hey, this, and Ben will ask a question, but he's open to hearing the answer, right? Like Ben will, hey, do you have a book on? Yeah, and he gets it. He does everything that when he asks me a question, if he's asking for it, and then I give him a suggestion, like he does it. Like he picks up that book, right? He's willing to open to new ideas. So again, I want to highlight to you, success isn't a secret. It's a system, right? And like Ben said, it's day in, day out. There's no shortcuts to success.
Yeah, and then I also think a big thing with success is you don't know everything. Like when you accept that you're not the greatest at everything in the world, that's when you can start to really climb a bit more, right? Because I don't know jack about mental mind. I can read a couple books and that's, I can barely read too. So that's how I struggle on its own, right? So you get, somebody else, oh yeah, like especially I'm a big fan of podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. You throw them on, while you're cooking or doing some work or whatever. It's awesome. So like, you told me the Tony Gonzalez podcast, Wide Open. He hasn't been doing it because of the pandemic, but I love those, him talking to all those people, them sharing their stories and, take a little bit from here, a little bit from there, a little bit from there. Because you don't know everything. Like, I'm a good football player. I could teach you how to play offensive line really well. I could probably struggle my way through teaching you anything else on the field. Yeah. If someone's like, hey, what do you know about, brain mechanics? Yeah. Nothing. Yeah. So, it's kind of one of those things, there's always stuff you can learn from other people because I've been doing football with whatever they're interested in their whole life. So like they can teach me things, I can teach them things. And that's kind of when you then get to be that well-rounded person and you can take those skills and apply them to whatever you want.
Yeah, I love that. It's that self-awareness piece, right? And you're talking about a couple of things there, right? That's the whole concept of masterminding, right? It's understanding where the specialized knowledge. You don't have to be like, you're not going to be great at everything, but you're self-aware enough. You know what you do well. You know what your gifts, your talents, and your abilities are. And one of the things I love about you is your ambition, your drive, your open-mindedness. Like you're like that 1%er, but you are open enough and coachable enough to realize like I'm going to fill in the gaps with what I'm not as strong in, and that's great. I love that.
Yeah, it's one of those things people always go. You'll see people go to the gym. I think is a really, really good example of it is because people go to the gym and they can't lift any weights, but they can do 1,000 pull-ups. So you watch them for that hour that they're there. They'll do 800 pull-ups and they'll do like 2 sets of dumbbell press because they're like, oh, I'm really good at pull-ups. I'm just going to do more pull-ups. And that makes me look really cool. And I feel like I've accomplished something today by doing more pull-ups. When in reality, okay, I'm great at pull-ups. I'll do a little bit, but I really should lift more weights because that's where I'm lacking in those areas. And I think that's how you become a better at anything, whether it's sport or life, is you find those things that you're not good at. Like when I was talking with various coaches that have seen me play, I'd be like what do I need to improve? Or if I'm watching film, I can see, okay, my ability to reset my outside hand after this certain movement is garbage. So I need to figure out, okay, why is that happening? And then I got to fix that. You're going to hate it because you keep trying to fix it and it doesn't work right because that's what you're body pattern is or whatever. So it's going to be hard and you're going to hate it. And it's going to be the worst thing in the world. And like, I just want to do this because I know I'm good at it and I can do it. And, just like any time, there's a time for that. There's a time, if you can squat 600 pounds for fun or you can't bench press. Yeah, every once in a while, you squat 600 pounds is fun. You have a good time. But you got to work on that other thing that you're not good at. So you can eventually have that. Okay, now I'm good at this and I'm good at this. Well, let's get another thing in here so that we can have, that's how I think you keep getting better regardless.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. I love that, Ben. Just that, you're always sort of seeking that 1%, right? How do I get better today, right? How do I achieve? How do I get a little better at that? Here's the last question I would love to ask you, Ben. So as we were talking about, this last year has been an interesting time, right? I mean, I even think of some of our conversations we've had, right? Where, there are things outside of our control, right? And depending on when you're watching this, right? If you're watching during this, COVID really has been, and like I said, just an interesting time. What would you say to someone who, maybe their health is in the shitter? Maybe they've gained a ton of weight. Maybe they've had a relationship breakdown. Maybe they've lost their job. Maybe their finances are, just in disarray. Like, and maybe they just feel like life has literally punched them on the gut. They're laying down on the field and just don't even know how to get back up. What is that one thing that they can do today that can at least get them start moving back in the right direction, start creating some momentum in their life again?
I think the big thing is relates to a lot of the things that we've been talking about is those small goals that you can have and focus on one small goal. If you're that, everything's crumbling around you and you can't figure out where to turn, pick one small goal and get that goal. And then that'll feel good. Because when you get that first goal, you're like, okay, that's one. Okay, now what can I do? Get the next one. So, an example would be like, my health and, I've gained a lot of weight in the pandemic, so I can't go outside. Gyms are closed. I can't do any of that. Right. So let's say, my health has gone horribly. I'm ordering food a lot because it's just easier than going out to get it. So, the first step would be, okay, I order food 5 times a week. Let's do that. Cut it down to 3 times a week and so 2 meals now I'm going to make, and I got to make them healthy. So like don't put something in the oven and heat it up kind of thing, like some frozen dinner or whatever, like make food, like a whole food meal. So like chicken, vegetables, rice or potatoes, like something like that. Make it a healthy meal. Okay, now you've done that for a little bit, 2 weeks. Okay, let's try and cut out all the fast food ordering and make healthy food all the time. Okay, now I've made healthy food all the time for a couple weeks. Let's try and do maybe some exercises at home. There's tons and tons of resources online for you to learn how to do exercises with, a stick and a bag of cement, right? Like you can do anything nowadays with the internet and learn how to do things and come up with different ways. I guess let's try and do that once a week. Let's try that. I know 3 times a week. So you just kind of keep building that. And then, once you feel comfortable, you'll feel like, you're doing good things because you are doing good things. You're making progress. And then when you do that, a lot of times your things will come up with it. You know what I mean? You're doing those healthy things and you're making your own foods. You're not ordering food every day. So you're saving X number of dollars a week, right? So then your finances picks up and that helps you out, right? So you got to get that one thing, that one tier going, moving that wheel, and then everything else will come with it. You may have to pay specific attention to another wheel as you climb, but things will move with you as you continue to move upwards.
That's great advice, Ben. And I love it for 2 reasons. One, I love how you focus on change one thing, right? Not, and again, it's so counterintuitive to like the New Year's resolution syndrome. And that's what always when people try to make changes, they try to change 18 things at once. And then they realize like, shit, like that's why things crumble. I love your idea of one thing. The other thing that I love, Ben, was you were adding a positive behavior, so there's less room for the negative behavior. Like it speaks volumes about, brother, you know what? Whenever this football journey's done, who knows? I could see you being you could definitely be whatever you want to be, a mental performance coach, human potential, success coach, whatever, brother. You got it. You're understanding it.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, it's one of those, like you said, you can't change everything overnight, and you can't do it by yourself, and you can't do it all at once. Those are like, if you accept those things, regardless of sport, field, whatever you want to do, those are the things that are going to change how you approach everything.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Ben, I wanted to acknowledge you. I wanted to acknowledge you. And many people don't know this. I shared this with Ben. I did reach out to Ben over the holidays, and I wanted to acknowledge you for the man you are, right? Being around someone like you who's so ambitious, so driven, so coachable, it's really been amazing for me. Like I've learned so much from you, and many of you don't know, in this transition away from teaching and coaching, what I was doing before, to this, it was actually Ben, where he didn't even know that just when he reached out to me for help, I really reconnected to how much I love working with people that don't want to talk about being great, that are willing to do the work. So I wanted to acknowledge you, Ben, because you helped me really get clarity on what I wanted my life to look like in this adventure for me. So thank you for the man you are. Thank you for inspiring me to reach for my next level of greatness. And I am so enthused to see what your next phase of your journey looks like.
Thank you. I appreciate those words. And yeah, you said I had absolutely no idea. You sent me that message one day, and I was like, oh, cool. This guy was helping me out. I thought he was doing all the helping me, and all of a sudden I get this message. Like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. But so you never know. And I'm glad that I was able to help you really kind of reignite that and kind of go, yeah, this is the path we're going down and stuff like that. Because like we said, there are those days where you don't want to do it. You don't want to do whatever, right? And sometimes you need that kick from somebody else, and they may not even know it, but it's always just a good thing to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. So what I'll do is I will leave Ben. I'll tag him in this post again. If you have any questions, you want to really start to get around and look, like, again, he's the real deal, right? He gets it. Okay, there's a reason he's achieved what he has up to this point, and there's a reason he's gonna, again, be successful not only on the football field, but as a parent, as a significant other, as a CEO. Like Ben, I'm enthused to see what the future has in store. So thank you for joining us today in the huddle.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us in the huddle. I would love to know, as always, what you got from it. Again, send me a message. Let me know what your takeaway was. The whole idea about the huddle is using these conversations as an opportunity to really learn about others' journey to greatness, because success always leaves clues. I look forward to seeing you next week in the huddle. Have an amazing rest of your day.